Good morning and welcome to your show for Sunday, August 24th. We are joining you live this morning from outside the Pepsi Center where the Democratic National Convention begins tomorrow. As you heard, it's a packed program today. In addition to the guests that we mentioned in the open, we also have an interview with the head of the Democratic Party, Howard Dean. He answered your questions, but first we want to welcome back a frequent guest to this program, Colorado Governor Bill Ritter. Thank you so much, sir, for being on your show.
Great to be here, Adam. Thank you.
One of the reasons I think the convention is here is I'm going to read to you the results of a poll out this morning, Quinnipiac University. Senator McCain and Senator Obama. Senator McCain was 47%, Senator Obama 46%. Margin of error 3 percentage points, 1,060 Colorado likely voters. Is this going to be this close all the way to November?
It looks like it. If you look at the Denver Post today, they ran a poll, I think it's the Mason-Dixon poll, that said kind of the same thing, only had Obama with the lead in Colorado, also within the margin of error. I think the race for the White House is going to come through the West, and specifically going to come through Colorado, Adam.
First question comes from Gene Solis, who wants to know what criteria you suggest that we as Colorado voters consider when we're evaluating presidential candidates as they relate to the business and life here in Colorado.
Well, I think that we have to ask the question, and I'm not. This isn't just about Obama. I mean, this is his theme. It's about change. But I think you really have to ask the question: how do we move into the 21st century in a very serious way as a state? How do we make our mark as a state, and really, in the national landscape, what should distinguish us? And I want to hear, I hope people hear about change, about the necessity for change, and about how we can build an economy around it. Colorado is ideally situated to create an economy. We call it, that's the new energy economy. But we're there, right, on wind jobs and solar, on things that have to do with research and development, alternative fuels. We have this unique position because of the institutions and because of the resources. I want to hear the candidates address that and talk about how they're willing to create national policy that will help us create jobs here.
We had an opportunity to speak with Tom Brokaw earlier this morning. We're going to see the interview a little bit later on. But I asked him this question, and I want to ask it to you as well. From Jenny Roscoe in Littleton, saying, obviously, you live here in Colorado, and there's been a lot of talk now about how both parties want to speak to our issues. Are you hearing that? Do you hear either side speaking to the issues of the region?
If you saw Barack Obama's energy policy, it really looks like the way we've been talking about energy. I think when the candidates talk about job creation, and particularly Obama talking about job creation around a new energy economy, I know that sounds like the answer to the last question, but I think it's really important to Coloradans because it's really how we will, as a state, distinguish ourselves. The issues that are about education reform, about health care, those are issues that are really big issues where we do have a national agenda would be very helpful to the states in carving out a health care agenda.
I want to ask you a question that is an important issue as it relates to a lot of people, that being abortion. David Cassidy from Denver writes in saying, please ask Governor Ritter how he's able to reconcile his Catholic faith with his support of Barack Obama, who supports a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, if I had just made abortion the only thing upon which I based my position, my political position, I would have been in favor of a president that took us into the Iraqi war, and I think in a very misguided way. George Bush was pro-life, but having said that, I think he's been maybe the worst president in the history of the United States, and that's how you look to this and say, you can't become single issue in this. It's a very important issue to me. I am pro-life, I am a Catholic, but having said that, in terms of this country and in terms of this world, I think there are a host of issues that you have to evaluate this on, and on balance, Barack Obama is absolutely the superior candidate.
Are you finding that the days of one-issue voters are gone?
Well, I think there's been a great frustration for people who were one-issue voters. And even if you think about the evangelicals, I've had a lot of conversation with evangelicals who are saying this issue about the environment, about the sacred trust we have in a created world, is something we as evangelicals need to pay attention to. I think single-issue voting may not be over for some smaller block of people, but I don't think you'll see people voting in as large a blocks around a single issue as they once did in the 90s and maybe even the 80s.
You and I were talking before we started about kind of how the world is going to view Denver and Colorado at the end of this convention. I want to read you a question from Corey Nelson in Parker, who writes in, as the former top prosecutor in the state of Colorado, what message do you have for those who are coming to Denver with intention to cause chaos, disrupt transportation, and instigate acts of resistance and violence? And conversely, what message do you have for the police?
So, Adam, this is a great thing about a democracy. I think you've heard me say this before. There's always a tension between security and liberty interests, especially in an open democracy like this. So the message to those who are protesters is we've done a lot to try and ensure your ability to express yourself, to freely express yourself, to be heard by the delegates. The courts have actually litigated this issue. We're gonna ensure that right. But we also understand, and you should understand, that there's a place where you run afoul of the law if you go too far, and we're going to enforce the law. And we're going to try and do all we can to make these delegates safe, to make Denverites safe, and just to ensure that people can enjoy this without being put in harm's way. So we're going to try and achieve that balance. Will it be perfect? We'll see at the end of the week how we've done, but we've really worked hard on getting to a place where we can say your First Amendment rights will be protected, but the safety of the citizens and delegates will be too.
What is your overall goal for this week? I mean, what do you want to see come out of this?
Listen, this is an international showcase for Colorado. I mean, you can go anywhere in the world and find CNN. And so I want to really showcase Denver as a city, Colorado as a state, and the Rocky Mountain West is a place that the rest of the world should, number one, envy. And quite frankly, I wouldn't mind at all if it had a long-term economic benefit because people want to come here and spend their tourism dollars. It's part of our Eco-Devo strategy. But this is this really important place for us, and just from the perspective of the aesthetics and the economy. Finally, I want people to understand how important the West is, the political landscape of the country.
And you think they're starting to talk about our issues?
Well, I think so, and I think they have to because of this transformation that's happened down here. Both parties have to. The Democrats cannot take the West for granted in spite of these really significant gains that the Democrats have made. The Republicans have, quite frankly, done a lot to forfeit their opportunity to govern here in the West, and I think they have to figure out how they get that back.
One last convention-related question before we get on to other issues. Scott Crow in Conifer wants to know if you know any good jokes about either Democrats or Republicans. He said it's the perfect follow-up question to ease or diffuse answers that are particularly hard-hitting.
So I'll try and make this a quick joke. This Irish woman, she immigrates here from Ireland, and she is now here, and she votes a straight Democratic ticket. Her son becomes a little wealthy. He's a Republican, but he still takes her to the polls. He's on the way to the polls, and he says, "How are you going to vote?" And she says, "I'm going to vote a straight Democratic ticket." He said, "If Jesus came back and he were a Republican, you wouldn't vote for him." And she said, "Why would Jesus change his party after all these years?" So that's a political joke.